most of you are probably familiar with Judy already, but Judy's been teaching enameling professionally since 1972. She lives in El Cerrito, California. She is self-taught. She served on the boards of the Northern California Enamel Guild and the Enamel Society. She founded the Center for Enamel Art in 2012. She currently teaches at the Crucible in Oakland, California. She has taught workshops all over the US and abroad. She has worked work in several permanent collections and in several books. She is the current recipient of the Enamel Society Creative Arts Award and received the Society's Woodrow W. Carpenter Award in 2009. And stay tuned for her brand new up and coming podcast about enameling. So, ladies and gentlemen, Judy Stone.
Okay, let's get us back in here. Hi, everybody. I feel very honored to be able to give you this presentation, and I'm hoping that you will enjoy it and that it will be informative. And I'm looking forward to your questions. The presentation is about the principles by which I'm conducting this workshop for the Northeast Enamel Guild, and it is about layering and about my approach to layering, which actually goes back almost to the beginning of my, I would say, sort of back to my career at beginning, and I'm hoping that it's going to be something that you benefit from. So I'm going to share screen, so you won't see yourselves. I don't know, will they see me too or no? I don't know.
I think you'll be a small photo at the top.
Good. I would rather be a small photo than anything else right now. I like being a small photo. That's a good thing. Okay, let me see if I can find the share screen button.
At the bottom.
I got it. I have both documents in here. Okay, let's see what we've got. Okay. All righty. This is a PowerPoint. Let's see if I can push this away here. Up. It just went away. It's not.
I can see it.
You can see it. I can't see it. Let me see if I can see it. That would be much better than anything else. Okay. What happened?
Did it drop behind another window? Do you have multiple windows?
I have no idea. I'm gonna try it again and see what we got. I keep on pressing share and it's not coming up over
Because
here.
you're already sharing.
But where is it? I don't see.
Look around your desktop, see if it's behind something.
Okay, look behind my desktop and see if it's somewhere. There it is. Okay. I'm hoping everybody can see this. I have approximately 66 slides, and I'm going to go through them hopefully as fast as I can go through them, with a little humor behind that, I hope. The topic is Optics and 3D Enameling, an approach to enamel layering. And this is the subject matter of the workshop I'll be teaching, but with a little bit different slant. Let's see here if we can do this. I wanted to go through a little history that would give you a sense of how I approach layering and how it has, I would say, I'm hoping it matured, but how it happened over time. So I'm going to be talking about my mentors. I'm going to be talking about the classes I took at San Francisco City College a little bit. I'm going to talk about working with the porcelain enamel industry, and then my ongoing need to make a living, which probably you won't be as concerned about as sometimes I am. Okay. One of the more important people in my life I never met. He died before I could ever meet him. His name was Fred Ball. He lived in Sacramento, California, and he wrote the book Experimental Techniques in Enameling. And Ball, at the time that I was coming to enamel, there were no books. there was no information, there were no workshops, there were no teachers, and I was kind of on my own and getting information where I could. And this was back in 1972, and when I moved to the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area. And Ball's book came out in 1973, and I bought it with very little funds that I had in 1973, and it opened my eyes to what I could do. And it seemed like this was what I wanted to do. And so from the moment that I read the book, I started working with some of the techniques that Ball talked about in the book. But the most important technique for me was a sgraffito over fired liquid white enamel. And this particular picture made the most important effect on me because it incorporated fire scale, it incorporated a lot of looseness and freeform. And at this time, I had no inkling if I was an artist. I had never taken an art class. I had never taken a metals class. And my degree was in German and comparative literature. And as an aside, I will just say that these degrees, my graduate degrees, were from Indiana University. And several months ago, Indiana just made my degrees invisible. They stopped giving degrees in my majors. And so my degree doesn't exist anymore at Indiana University. So if any of you are alumni, just tell them, please. Anyway, because Ball is and was from Sacramento, the impression of his work, not just from the book, but the ability that I had of getting accessibility to his work was really, really important to me. Most of you probably are familiar with this big piece on the left, The Way Home, which is 12 by 12 inch panels on the side of a parking garage. And it can be seen from the freeway in Sacramento. It is an amazing piece and took him several years to do. And I actually had the ability to work on this piece in restoration. And someday, I won't tell you about this now, but it was quite a process. Anyway, I have led tours of Ball's work, and the hard part about Ball right now is the book exists. You can find it on archive.org. It's been out of print for many, many years. And so I felt that it is my duty in some kind of strange way to teach his techniques. And I've taught them all over the world, actually. And the more I teach them, the more I learn from him, which is quite amazing. The piece on the right was actually a piece in the 2009 retrospective that the Enamel Arts Foundation did. And it's a sgraffitoed white on copper round small dish that has been colored with green enamel. And one of the things that was extremely important to me about Ball was he didn't use color in a way that I thought maybe it needed to be used. So the next step was, again, color for Ball. His late work, the last thing he made, was this huge two-part panel in a health center in Sacramento. And he died before he could finish it. His mother and his assistant finished the piece. But it's a view of the Sacramento area to the foothills and the mountains, the Sierra Mountains behind him. And it consists of a ton of these small pieces that were cut out and pieced together, and hundreds of them. And an amazing feat. And the one thing about them is that they mirror the way that I approach currently, and not too long in the past, my approach to sgraffito and 3D, and actually 3D optics and 3D layering. And these, if you ever get a chance to see these, this is an amazing, amazing piece. So back about 10 years ago, I took a hot air balloon ride, and it was supposed to be over a very scenic part of California, and there was a storm, so they moved our balloon right near Sacramento to farmland, flat farmland. And I was not a happy camper, so I decided that olive red ball, I would do a whole series of hypothetical topographies, and these have become my 4-inch by 4-inch and 6-inch by 6-inch wall pieces, and I keep making them because there will never be enough hypothetical typographies as far as I'm concerned. But mirroring the lines of Ball's pieces, not so much the scenery. And the scenery is extremely important to Ball, where he lived, and it's important to me as well. This was a tribute vessel that I made in honor of him. I couldn't give it to anybody. It is, and it became a way for me to experiment using various whites. So this is my Fred Ball number 3. My other mentor, Bill Hellwig, I call him the painter and science guy. He taught me a lot of stuff, and the science of enameling, the idea of particle size. He helped me solve all the problems that I was having when I first met him, or the second time I met him. The first time I met him, I thought he hated me and I thought he was a curmudgeon. But 10 years later, he was a wonderful, wonderful teacher and was my friend until he died. And the things that he taught me are what I would love to teach everybody else. And part of this optics and 3D layering is about teaching and about seeing. It's all about seeing. The piece on the left is part of his bedsheet series that he did after his wife died. And the piece on the right is part of the Stone stories that he did. And the Stone stories, not my name, have a lot to do with pull-through, and which is extremely important to me. And so is the bedsheet series, because it has to do with ways of drawing with enamel. And we'll get to that in a second. This is a piece that I did in a Bill Hellwig workshop using underglaze pencils, and the technique that he taught involving lead-free opaque enamels that have been sandblasted and then drawn over. And this is a 10-inch by 10-inch piece that I call Fruit. My other mentor of import is June Schwartz, who was my friend until the day she died in 2015. And June started the Northern California Enamel Guild. She was my friend, and she was my mentor and my supporter when I felt like I didn't have any supporters. And the important things from June I learned early on. She taught me a lot in her Bastai work about using P3 underglaze black and about this concept of using a flux as an evener. And we will get back to that in a little while. Before she died, she taught me about using Metamucil as a glue substitute for lotus root powder. And it indeed works without leaving a residue. So just to pass that on. Here's June in her living room. You can see her pieces behind her. This is one of her pieces. I spent a lot of time in that living room, and I spent a lot of time with her. And I feel very fortunate because I inherited her studio. And the most important thing that I inherited was her smock, her blue and white striped smock, which I keep absolutely as a treasure. I miss her. What I learned from all my classes was, number one, I didn't want to make jewelry, and this was in my metalsmithing class. And part of that was because I was developing eye problems. And it's only been in the last recent history that part of that is about depth perception. I found out that I loved to draw and paint. And then I had to need to figure out how all of this was going to fit into my career, since I was calling myself a professional enamelist. What you're seeing here is an enameled washing machine lid that I made in the early 1950s based on the great late Mel Somorowski, who taught at Kent State and was famous for his washing machine lids. This particular washing machine lid was produced in a conference up in Seattle, and the black in the lid was silk-screened porcelain enamel, black porcelain enamel, and acting as a scratch board for me. So it's a washing machine lid. So I wanted to actually be able to paint and draw on large pieces of steel. This is something I gravitated toward in the early 90s. And the piece on the left was the first commission that I ever got in porcelain enameled steel. It was a sign for a house, and it is still there in Oakland, California, and it is still looking great. And I did it in a place, very mom and pop type porcelain enamel firm called uh, uh, Porcelain Patch and Glaze. And the piece on the right, I produced at KVO Industries, and it was for a series of murals that I did over several years' time for housing projects in Southern California. And this one, it's hanging upside down, but it's based on my impressions of houses in Idra, the Greek island of Idra, where I stayed for a while. And it's called Red Steps. Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of this stuff. 3D enamel. Okay, as far as I'm concerned, enamel has the potential for being three-dimensional simply because you look through it, you see through it, and you can see through metal, to the metal, and you can see through previous layers of enamel. And what blocks that sight is either opacity or some translucency, or objects like foil or some other kind of object that is in an interstice in the layers. But enamel is inherently 3D if it's used in layers, even opaque enamel. And the wonderful thing about this is it's what makes this medium so special, and it makes the idea of seeing enamel so special. So let's get into optics. Okay, so dimensionality, 3D color. This is something that we can see through layers because of light being reflected and refracted. One of the first things that I learned about transparent enamel was that it produces a swimming pool effect. And this is very easy to grok because the deep areas of a pool are darker than the areas that are not so deep. And the same paint or the same color is on the bottom of the pool. So the more there is, the darker; the less there is, the lighter. And this is an extremely important concept, both for particle size and everything else that we do with enamel, and an important concept with the manufacture of porcelain enamel, especially, and all enamels actually. So the swimming pool effect. Light and darkness, chiaroscuro, as it's called, an enamel piece is really important for vitality, and I think in small enamel formats. Many of you work in jewelry, many of you work in very small formats because we're limited by the size of our kilns. And to increase the ability to have a vital piece, we need to be able to really look at how lights, darks, transparencies, all of that plays. And the more we see that, the more vital our pieces can be. Chiaroscuro goes hand in hand with what I call creation of line and negative space. You saw the lines that I made based on what Fred Ball taught me, sgraffitoing through liquid white. This is just a very simple cloisonné piece from China, but one of the things that's very interesting about it is it's actually 2 dimensions, but where the lines are the busiest, it tends to fold into the background, so that you see the less busy areas coming forward. And these are just very simple principles, but they're very interesting. This is Fred Ball's, one of his dishes, his bowls, and his interpretation of sgraffito through white enamel with line and negative space. And the idea of negative space here is the darkness that happens when there's no enamel. So transparent enamel over copper without any intermediary can be viewed as negative space. So this is kind of how I adapted my technique of working. And we'll get back to that in a second. The other factor here is the base metal. A lot of people don't really understand the sense that metal colors enamel. In other words, copper is pink, silver is gray, gold is yellow, and they all affect how we see light passing through. And it can be used in a whole lot of different ways. Um, Again, the other thing is, what is the base enamel that goes over it? And uh, it can be anything that you want. So here we go. Um, Sgraffito over liquid white enamel. And this is where I start. So why do I use liquid white? Um, it's easy to sgraffito it. And for me, because painting for me became such a special thing, that I look at everything I do as a painting. In other words, there's a gessoed surface, there's an underpainting, and then there's layers, especially in oil painting. And that's how I kind of look at my work. And it gives me a sense of that I'm actually seeing. I use the 533 because it's accessible, and when I teach it, it makes it a little bit easier for people to have it. And other manufacturers of liquid enamel, which is actually porcelain enamel frit, is can not work so well under the layering processes I teach. So I've stuck with 533 because it works. I'm asking here, what is the best way to apply liquid enamel over copper for layering? Any way works. But for me, the best way was spraying, because I could vary the surface and still make it thin and even. Okay, let's talk about spraying. In order to spray liquid enamel, you need to make sure that it goes through a sprayer. And that means particle sizes of the liquid enamel need to be 200 mesh or slightly smaller. And it has to be able to go with compressed air through a sprayer. Sometimes we have to sieve those coarse particles out, because sometimes when we get them from Thompson, they're sort of impregnated, although they're doing a little bit better about that. But I think sieves, any kind of sieve that'll sieve out any coarse particles from the liquid white, will work. Sprayers, there's several different kinds. I use an airbrush, and I also use the image on the left is the Pache double action. That's what I use. And then the critter sprayer on the right, which is what we're going to be using in the workshop, which can accommodate a lot of enamel in it and costs hardly anything to use and is totally simple. And then we have the expensive options, the gravity feed airbrushes like the Iwata, and then the air guns that are gravity feed for large quantities that are used in industry mostly. And then our air compressors can be anything from the $100 pancake ones that come from Craftsman and so forth. They need to have the ability to get up to 150 psi, and for our settings, approximately 55 to 60 psi will make the enamel go through just fine. We need the accessories, we need the hose, we need the water filter, we need the regulator, we need the connectors. None of this should cost too much money. And then we need a spray booth, which you can make out of a cardboard box. And all it needs, because we want to keep the spray from the liquid enamel from getting on us, getting in our lungs, getting on everybody else, getting on our clothes, and getting in our environment. These boxes are very simple. You have a work area, sometimes with a turntable. You have a furnace filter, and you have an area that's filtered into with a fan with a hole in the back that's turned. The fan is turned backwards and draws the powder that is the overspray out. And this is something we're going to be using in our workshop for the conference, and it is extremely easy to make. And if you ever want to make something, contact me. I'll give you information at the end. Okay, let's look at dimensions and look at two-dimensional surfaces. This is an airbrush spraying, briefly spraying. And as you can see, I don't know if you can see my cursor. Is my cursor showing up? I can't tell.
Yes.
It is. Okay, so that helps. Um, it looks a little heavier here and a little lighter here. It's not so important. In terms of an even layer, you're going to see that more, a little bit more spraying here, just a tad more spraying. Okay, you're going to see that more in the drying. I use a heat gun to dry, and just follow the heat is near the top of the piece. You're going to be able to follow it down from here down to here and see how the color changes and turns very opaque. And then when we get farther down over here, you can see that there's a little area that's still dark, it's still wet. And so we can take wet and dry, separate them out, but it looks like a very even surface when we do that. This is called a bisque surface because I'm drying with a heat gun that reaches 1250 degrees or greater. And what a bisque surface does, and industry does this all the time, is to give you a hardened layer, which makes graffito really easy in these surfaces. The idea also is that you can also spray on a dried surface before you fire it. You can spray over this, and you can spray colors over this. You can do all kinds of things by doing this. Okay, so we're going to start with this. This is kind of my sample piece. This is something that we're going to go through some phases with this. Sgraffito through liquid white enamel. One of the things that is, we've got negative space happening right here, and we've got line, and the line a little thicker in here, which we can make even thicker with a brush. Sgraffitoing for me is one of the things that I really enjoy doing. And this has been put in a pickle bath, although it's been taken out pretty quickly, and so it hasn't been totally pickled. If you want to have any kind of texture or any kind of anything in the negative space, this is where you do it. Okay, so let's go back to this a second. This is, I'm going to go back. This is not correct. Okay, let's go over here. So I'm going to go through these phases, and then we're going to go back. One of the things that happens in my layering process is I create an underpainting, which is this right here. And then the layering starts. And the layers can go, I've got one layer here, as you can see there's color added, and I've got a second layer here. And I can go up to 10 or 20 layers because I'm building very thinly. So the considerations here for color, and we're going to revisit this, is I'm wanting control. I think that part of my issue is that I'm a control freak, and so this is what happens here. And so all of my initial layers are all underfired. I fire to orange peel and maybe slightly greater than that. And that allows me to change my palette as I'm looking at it, allows me to actually sit with my work and actually look at it so I can choose my palette. The thing that I'm trying to do is push color forward and back to build change and work with gradations so that I have a piece that's both interesting and busy in a small format. Okay, I am, okay. We're going to go back now to underpainting, and this is the underpainting of the sgraffitoed piece that I showed you. So why it's an underpainting? Well, this is the color palette that I'm going to be working with in the layering process, and what it is Thompson lead-free transparent enamels, sifted 150 mesh onto the surface, and there are 5 enamels that I choose. At least one of them is either a flux or a light colored enamel. Then there's a couple that are medium color, and the color palette should be varied. And then one dark color. So I've got here I believe a 2015 and some light blue, and then some 2810. And if those of you who know Thompson enamel, you're going to know this stuff. And then probably a 2660 or a 2680 in here too, or something else. And then my color buildup, and we're going to go through this in a second, but this is a gradual color buildup over layers. You can see some of it over here and some of it over here. See if I can point it out to you. Right in here, right in here, right in here, and a little bit in here, and then more in here, over here and over here. And this is, I think, the third or fourth layer, and then almost finished. So opacity, more opacity here, more yellow here, more blue here. And I actually finished with silver foil, but I don't have that slides to show you. So this was about 4 layers, this particular one. And I'm going to actually go back because I want you to see this other slide that I put in the wrong place. This is underpainting. What happens with your 5 colors, if I sift them randomly. I don't have a place where I want them to be. So if I put them in different places, my underpaintings are going to look different. And this is the same enamels, 4 different underpaintings. Okay, now I'm going to move on. All right, so now you saw the sort of finished results. How do we get there? This is the part that can be confusing. There are 2 things that I do in each firing of layering past the underpainting. The first part of that is called wet floating, and Karen Cohn gave me the name wet floating for this. And then the second part is what I call fluxes evener. And so just to briefly define wet floating, it's a matter of really using the particles wet and pulling them from the surface of the water into place. So using fine particles is important because they don't sink as fast and they're easier to pull. And but it doesn't mean that you can't use coarser particles in these layers. And one of the things that I do is I use enamels. Pretty much I use a lot of fines, 325 mesh, but I use enamels in almost every particle size. And enamels from every manufacturer, leaded, unleaded, anything from Soyer to enamels that were made 100 years ago. And then the next thing I do after drying and clearing the lines that I may go over is what is called fluxes evener. And this is what June Schwartz taught me. And after a lot of experimentation, I use a lead-bearing flux. It's C10 from Blythe, and it's sold at enamels.com. And the interesting thing is that with a lot of testing, you can find the flux that acts as an evener for you. And what that is that when you sift this flux over an unfired layer that's been dried, it keeps the integrity of the lines and the negative space and evens out any disparities caused by the properties of the diverse enamels that are used. And it is an amazing thing to know. It is a very amazing thing to know. Okay, let's go to wet floating. All right, I am wet floating. This is a opaque 325 mesh 1305 that I'm floating into place with my brush. This happens to be the second layer on this piece. I've already put 1 layer on here already. You see how easy it is to put this on, and it's extremely thin. The enamels are already on here. The pinks on the side, and they have been put on thicker. These 2 sides have been put on thicker. So we're going to go to the next slide. And the slide after that we're going to go to, if we can find it. And now we're going to do this, which is the actual second application. I put this on before I put the white on over here. And this is 1202, an opaque 325 mesh. but it's already been put on once. The 1305 has also been put on once, but it happens to be the fines of the Thompson lead-free opaques tend to be very opalescent. So I'm going to show you this just briefly. And in a second, I'm going to go over the line by accident right there. When it's dry, I can clear the lines with a brush or a sgraffito tool. But again, up close, you can just see how the water pulls the particles. It's not wet packing, it's wet floating. Okay. And this is the second layer. It's all dried. And it's been all the other colors that I put on it, you can see, and some of the things look bumpy, and that's because they are coarser particles. And in the applying of the particles, what you can't see here is that I've actually mixed some colors. Like I've mixed a darker blue in here to give it a little bit of gradation. I've mixed a little bit of darker color here, and a little bit of darker color here. It all changes and all works out. This is the dryness, and then comes the evener flux. Here's my 150 C10 on the dried layer. While you're watching that, you can see the finished sifting on the right, and it's sitting on a point rack, and these have been made especially for me, and I don't think they're being sold anywhere. But I use these for my flat objects because, like in industry, the heat is dispersed in a lot of different places, and it makes for less warping. Okay, this is coming out of the kiln. It's a little blurry. This is that firing coming out of the kiln. And as you can see, what's happening as it cools, the opacities are beginning to show, and the negative space is not clearing as yet. It would take several firings to do that, but and this is under fired, but you can see a little bit of the mixing that I've done, and a little bit of the opacity starting to come up in various places. So this piece will probably take another 2 or 3 firings to be finished. I can't do this very easily. So one of the things I just wanted to show you, this is a sgraffito, three sgraffitoed pieces, and I've used 3 different fluxes over them. And to kind of show you what the fluxes do over the lines in the negative space. To the left is 2008, which is a crackle flux from Thompson. In the center is the 2020 silver flux transparent from Thompson. And as you can see, the lines aren't, the spaces in the copper are not clear as yet, although they're starting to clear on the right-hand side over here. This area right here is clearing. It'll probably disappear in the next firing. This is still holding its own over here. This is the N1 flux, silver flux from Ninomiya, and it is a leaded flux. And this is, as you can see, it's not distorting the lines like the 2008 did, but it's clearing. And what that means is the tendency to distort will happen if this is used too soon. I use the N1 as a final flux. I use several different ones, but this is the final flux that I use for the most part in my work. One of the things about the fluxes, if you don't use them, your pieces could look like this. If you use a leaded, it's going to be a little bit more even. And if you use a transparent, it's probably, the colors are not going to be the same. The colors change under all of these, and this is the beauty of having to look at your work. And these are a lot of tests that I do periodically if I want to see what things are doing. I made tests over these samples using different fluxes and to see what they would do. And I don't do this very often, but when you're first starting to work with this process, testing is fun, and you should try it. One of the things that I do when I first started my work and the layering process was I had glass balls from Japan. My eyesight was terrible. I thought, well, the glass balls I could put in my pieces and do braille. That was one of the things I was thinking about. And so I use these glass balls now. I put them in the very first layering firing over the flux. Sometimes I put them, you can see through the flux, you can see the lines. I put them over the lines and they actually do wonderful things on the lines, or I just use them for emphasis. They are what I call glass additives. Okay. The other thing is that as you get closer to the end of your layering, various things can happen having to do with the surface. And I'm very much a person who thinks about surface all the time. These are things that you can use. I do use silver foil, sometimes silkscreen silver foil, sometimes gold foil in pretty much all of my work that I do. And I usually put it in the second to the last firing, and I use pions, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But if I want texture, there's a lot of things I can use to produce texture. If I want painting, there are a lot of things I can use to produce paintings, including overglazes, underglazes, etc. But this is not about overglazes and underglazes. This is about surface, the final surface. And you usually don't put anything over any of this stuff in a final surface, but it gives the piece another dimension because usually light reflects off of it, and you can play with that surface with everything else that you're doing with your layering. For me, my finishing process, which I'm not going to show you here because it's way too complicated and long, has to do with the fact that when pieces come out of the kiln, when they're finished, they're usually lumpy somewhat. And artists learn to abrade the surfaces flat, create flat surfaces with a lot of different ways. I like my lumpy surfaces, but I also want a satin finish because I like the tactility of being able to feel that surface. So I've devised a way of finishing my work that preserves the lumpiness and the tactility. And it's something that I've done for several decades now, and it's part of these, especially my vessels, because it's important that people touch them. I have been making destructive vessel forms for a while now, and the thing about them is that they're never the same, and they're always a challenge. They have their own 3D optical effects, the vessel form, and it has to do with light, and it has to do with which surfaces are covered or not covered, and which angles are seen at any given time. And is there such a thing as busyness and these kinds of things? So these are the things I struggle with my vessels. Sometimes optical effects with vessels and with 3D forms can be in the surface, like bust tie, textured forms, raised forms, embossed forms that you enamel over and see through. Other times when you have things that you put on the surface that catch light in different ways. The piece on the right has a scrubby that I dipped in red liquid enamel and enameled onto the surface. The destructive vessel forms have a whole life of their own and a reason for being, and the reason sometimes changes, but they're an important part of what I am and what I do, and I will probably continue making them as I learn about them, and they always teach me something. Kim told me you all wanted to know about how I make these things, so I'm just going to, it's really easy. I use a plasma cutter. I cut standard vessel forms or things that I can buy at a thrift store and hammer the shit out of. And then I take these pieces and then yes, I rivet them back on, either the same pieces or different pieces. Before I rivet them, I put a liquid counter enamel on the backs of the riveted pieces and through the rivet holes. And then this is a piece of Scotch tape that I have put on there to put it in place until the rivets can move so that I can and see. And then I sew, and I almost flunked home economics in the seventh grade, so I don't really call it sewing, I call it stitching. And the important thing about the stitching is that I really want the sewing to be transparent. It lets the viewer into the kind of the internal part of the piece. You know, I want the intestines of the piece to be viewed through these sewing areas, but the sewing areas have to be super tight. They can't have any flexibility in them, and they also get sprayed back and front, and they also get wet layered as well with wet floating. So here's me with my impaired depth perception sewing a piece. It takes me twice as long now because I can't get things through the holes because I can't thread a needle, so I can't thread the holes as well. So it's fun and it's labor intensive and it's part of what I do. Okay, I'm almost done. I'm going to show you some of the vessels that I've done over time. This one was almost the most perfect vessel that I ever did, and I forgot to sign it. I usually sign it with an underglaze on the back, and I forgot, and I had to re-enamel the signature, and it was less perfect when I re-enameled it, but nobody seemed to notice, so I don't know. It was a very strange thing. This is the very first cut dish that I did, and it was in 1995, and I liked it. So I decided I was going to do more, and then the plasma cutter came in, and the sewing came in, and the surface came in, and very soon thereafter, and I started making dishes, not destructed so far that these were, you know, not extremely destructed. But then at the same time, I was really destroying things. And this is an earlier 12-inch in diameter vessel that I was having a lot of trouble with edges. And so I took copper foil and riveted it around the edge of this piece. But what I learned from the cutting of my vessels is how the shape changes. And I started calling these things burnt offerings because it was in the heat and in the fire that the shape took form. And I could cut the piece to have it take any shape I wanted it to take. So this is one of these pieces. It's not, there's a lot of enamel on the outside, but not a lot of wet floating on the inside. It's basically almost homogeneous on the inside. And then I started having vessels made for me. And this is one of the vessels that Jack De Silva made for me. And it's such a wonderful enamel vessel, or a vessel for me to enamel, because it was so difficult getting into the creases that he created in this vessel. And so I was ever thankful for this. Sometimes my vessels are actually dishes and they have to be mended or banded with pieces. And so this is a piece that's banded in the front and the rear. I do the backs and the fronts of most of my pieces. And so they have identities back and front. This was a fairly large piece. And this is a piece that is at the Crocker Museum. It's based on a trip I took to the Greek island of Idra a while back, and it's called Hermione 3, and I love this piece because when it's mounted, you look through the V here and you see everything, and you see through to the here. And it's one of those things that's, you know, sometimes I really like my work. So this is the end of my presentation, and I'm going to leave this slide up for you to look at. And I'm going to try to go back. Can we do this? Can we have the slide up and then I can see everybody and answer questions?
Sure.
How do we do that? Do I stop sharing or what do I do?
Um,
I
Do
was asking
you
you.
want to have the questions in the chat, or do you want to have people just turn their microphone
Okay, guys,
on?
I will listen. Let's do the chat, and I'm going to remember in my head what you all look like. That's going to be a big one. This is information here about how you can reach me, and I am reachable to answer questions. I also wanted to tell you that I'm going to be teaching optics in 3D color right after Labor Day at the Crucible, a week-long class, which is very long. And it's something that I similarly taught at John C. Campbell last November. It's a very involved class. I'm also going to be teaching a 5-week enamel drawing class, meeting one day a week, in a very unusual way of teaching drawing, I think. I also am starting to have one-day work sessions up at KVO Industries, which is the porcelain enamel firm that I work out of in Santa Rosa, California. And this will be through the Crucible. Anybody's invited to come. There's no experience necessary. Learning how to work in the factory. And I'm going to try to schedule these for one day a month to start out with. So we have 3 in the next 3 months, and they will increase. 2 other classes that I'll be teaching this quarter. One is called Enamel Surfaces. It ties back to the slide I showed. And the other is re-enameled camping wear, which is what I tried to have a wholesale line on a long time ago, but didn't work. But there's a lot of possibility for marketing this stuff, so and I highly recommend it. Okay, let's go to the chat.
Okay, so somebody asked, are the layers sifted over the 533 or sprayed? I think you answered that because they're
Yes.
wet floated, right?
Well, the first layer is sifted. That's the 150 mesh transparent lead-free enamels that are sifted, and that's the underpainting. The other enamels that are the wet floated are not sifted. The only sift then comes with the flux.
Okay.
Okay?
And somebody asked, what is the evener flux that you're using? You said it's from Enamels. Scott Ellis has it, but
Yes, he sells 120 mesh, which is fine. And it's this Blythe C10 is what I use. It's a leaded enamel. And or you can attempt to try some of the Thompson fluxes, some of the other leaded enamels that are a little bit harder fusing. You need something that's not too soft fusing. And there are a lot of ways to do this thing. There's no one way to do it.
okay. And can you explain why you under fire?
It gives me more control over the layers. In other words, if for any reason I fire to maturity, I'm introducing transparency and darkness through the transparency too soon. And that's the major reason that I underfire.
Um, can you talk a little bit more about the plasma cutter?
The plasma cutter was something that uh, I think don't remember exactly when I saw it demonstrated, but I went to the local welding shop and they actually loaned me one for 2 weeks to use. I didn't know how to use it or anything, and I was in seventh heaven. But then I had to give it back. So then I spent time because I couldn't afford to buy one. Even this one at $800 was beyond my budget at the time. And so I went to various people's studios and used theirs until I started teaching at the Crucible. And if you all go to thecrucible.org, you'll see that they've got everything under the sun. And I can use their plasma cutter whenever I wish because I'm faculty there. And I have the use of pretty much all of the equipment there if I wish, which makes it a wonderful institution. It teaches a lot of stuff. And for me, this was a godsend because the plasma cutter lets me have a burnt edge. It gives me the ability to burn my edges, to finish my edges as I wish, and start with whatever roughness and to go with whatever smoothness I want.
Okay, and Steph asks, she says, I have an Iwata airbrush and I use liquid acrylic paints. Would I need to buy a completely new nozzle? to use exclusively for enamels
Okay, I'm
or
gonna
could I
stop. I'm
fluff?
gonna stop sharing. I want to see you guys. I'm really sick of being blind here. I'm gonna stop this. Okay, who's Steph? Where are you? Are you here somewhere?
Steph, are you still
Is
here?
this you? Oh, Steph, hi. Um, you can run some kind of solvent through it. You just need to get everything in there out. And if you run solvent through it, I think that would be the way that I would approach using it. If it's an H series, it should be a gravity feed H series of water. Um, uh, the thing is that you want the brushes clean. When I teach spraying, I also teach how to clean this stuff, so it's important. Okay.
Next question is there a problem using leaded flux with unleaded enamels?
Never. Oh, well, okay. The way that I see it, the flux as evener is not a problem if it's used as an evener. It is a problem, and I think I showed you the slide that had 3 examples on it when you don't use it, when you use a flux, and what kind of a flux. And not all fluxes work well over disparate enamels. Okay, so to act as an evener, it has to eliminate the disparity, and that's why it's an evener. I hope that makes sense. Does it make sense to anybody? Nobody?
I was always told that you have to put leaded on top of unleaded, that it always wants
Wait,
to be on
okay.
top. Can't do it the other way around.
This is because of the expansion, the
Right.
coefficient expansion, right? And it's a good principle, but in this particular process, you don't have to. I mean, we're not putting them on top. Our wet floating is all these enamels, leaded, unleaded, all together in one layer. So it's different. It's different. And I'm
Okay.
using, yeah, go ahead. And it's okay.
Next question is what temperature do you like to fire at?
I've fired pretty much all my life at 1500, more or less. I changed the time so that I have a set point controller and a Vasella kiln. And I've had this Vasella kiln before they had metal clad, so it's got stuff on it. But I basically set my kiln at 1500, but it doesn't matter that much. I eventually want my clarity to be clear. And when you're using a lot of these layers, it's important. But if you want to have more control, it's always the maxim is low and slow. So if you want to have complete control, low temperature and doing it slowly, you get to the same place.
How do you support pieces in the kiln so as not to get marks on the sides that are touching
Um,
the support?
I fire my vessels upside down, or I fire them with special firing tools that were made for me for sculptural pieces. But my flat pieces I fire on the point racks, and sometimes I have hanging things so that you don't see any marks on the outside if I don't want the inside seen. But for the most part, vessels are all fired upside down. And if they're wet floated on both sides, I fire both sides at the same time, and I put that evener flux on both sides at the same time. So it's a whole other story.
The evener flux goes on top of the unfired wet floated.
Yes, dried, unfired, wet floated.
Do
Yes.
you use clear fire or the
Only if
Lotus
I'm
route?
working dimensionally and I have to actually have the enamel sticking better. Even with 150 mesh, which is actually, gravity doesn't pull it off as easily with a dimensional piece because it's 150 mesh. And those of you who know about particle size, all of this is really important. But I basically use a mister or sprayer to spray and then sift and spray and then sift gradually to get the flux on the whole piece. Does that make sense?
And what
Yeah.
mesh, what particle size is the evener?
150 is what I'm using for the mat for the flux.
Okay.
It stays on there better, and it allows for the clarity to see the layers. You want to be able to see that. You don't want to make it too thick. Okay. Okay.
Any other questions?
I see. Is that a hand? Do I see a hand? No hand.
No, no
I
hands
had
raised.
a question about whether the recording will be available on your website. I asked the question right at the beginning of the chat, but I don't think I've seen an answer.
It will be on YouTube. I will send the YouTube link to everybody that registered. And it'll live there on our YouTube site.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And the last thing I wanted to tell you is about the podcast, since Kim mentioned it.
You
I've
mentioned it.
All right, whatever. But I've been enameling a long time. I've grown old enameling like many of us, and I have a lot of knowledge inside of me, and I want to get it out. And this is not just technical knowledge. I have been somebody who's been an activist in the enamel community, whatever that means, my whole life. And so this podcast is not about necessarily technique, about me, or about one person. It's about the whole field of enameling, about everything, about like why Guido Marin's death at Thompson Enamel matters, why we don't have other suppliers for certain things, and on and on and on and on. Issues, interviews, history, the whole 9 yards. And I will do this until I drop dead, because this is what I want to do. And I figure I'm at the stage right now where I only have so many years to live. And so I'm hoping it's going to be a nice long life for this podcast, to the point where I can pass it on to everybody else. And I'm also considering that the host institution for the podcast will be the Center for Enamel Art, which has been in hiatus for the last 6 years. And this might be what it needs to get it out of hiatus. And the only thing I would tell you is, anybody who knows anything about podcasts, I need all the help I can get, because I have never done a podcast. I am technically very far away from being technically adept at this, and could use a ton of help. But I'm hoping to get this thing on the road by the end of the summer, if sooner. So, and I'll be putting out notices everywhere, so that people, and it'll be free. There will not be any need to pay for it. And you will be able to subscribe to it, but you won't need to pay for it at all, ever, I hope. Unless you want to donate to the Center for Enamel Art. So that's all I have. And I wanted to thank you all for doing this. It's really special for me. So thank you. And thank Kim. And thank the Guild.
You're getting a ton of thank yous. April says you should write a book.
No, I can't write, and I can't see, and I can't type. A podcast is the way to go.
You could dictate it. You've got somebody here from New Zealand,
Who's from New Zealand?
Ruth
Tell me.
Napper.
Who?
Ruth Napper.
I don't know if I know Ruth, but thank you. I know the time zone is very different, but thank you. Okay.
Lots and lots of thank yous.
Yeah, well, I thank you all for your patience and for bearing with this, because sometimes it gets confusing, and I gave you a lot of information and I left out a whole lot. I see Mary Weinick is there, and she took my long optics and 3D class, and she knows I left out a lot of information, didn't I, Mary? Anyway, are we ending this? Are we going to do end?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Before I end, I'm going to put some links in the chat that I promised. I can find my list. As I mentioned, Judy's workshop is full, but we have a wait list, and sometimes people do drop out. So
Oh dear. Oh dear.
that's the link for Judy's wait list.
And when you contact me, I can give you handouts and other information. I didn't want to put them on the chat on the PowerPoint, but I'm happy to send you written materials if you need it, or even talk to you on the telephone if you want to talk. Anybody who wants to do this, anybody who wants to share information with me, I welcome it. It's who I am, and I will always be that way. So thank you.
And okay, Jan Harrell workshop and the conference registration.
That's
So,
all there.
yep, it's all there in the chat, and I can also send it with the link to the YouTube video in case you guys want to watch again. I know she covered a lot of information, so you probably do want to watch again.
Thank
I
you
hope it
very, very
wasn't too, I
much.
just hope it wasn't too much. I tried to pare it down as much as I could, but it's a lot. It is a lot.
It's
But
never too much. It's never too much.
it's never too much. Do we
Nope.
really? Okay. Okay. That's good to know. That's good to know. Okay. Goodbye, everybody. It's been a pleasure.
Goodbye.